One day on my YouTube feed, I saw a video of someone playing a new asymmetrical named Alter Ego, so I gave the game a try for a couple hours, returned to play it again the day after, wrote a script, forgot about said script until I saw this video in particular, and remembered the script I initially wrote for it. So here it is, my thoughts and opinions with the game Alter Ego. Huge thanks to Craft for the video and starting a discussion on this new asymmetrical that in my opinion needs a lot of work, but let's start with the pros for the game. Nice visuals. The game offers decent visuals and pretty nice lighting within maps that make everything feel slightly cartoonish yet keeping a more grounded look, especially this map. This map's lighting and vibe is so perfect for me. Smooth animations. Not much to say here, the animation work for this game is pretty fluid and satisfying to watch. Survivor designs are nice. A little on the simpler end of designs, but it doesn't damage how well they look for my taste. Overall, I feel satisfied with how they look. Game has pretty nice voice acting. For the standard of Roblox games and how certain voice actors can sound really robotic and bland, this game has pretty nice voice work. And that's about it. Unless someone wants to add more in the comment section, this is all I can think of for the game's pros. And when mentioning pros, you have to talk about the cons. The game's cons. Poor balancing. For the sake of keeping it brief, I'll just mention a couple things as there's a lot more to talk about. Catechus' dash is uncounterable with how instant you can swing right after. The one-shot ultimates that both Husk and Catechus have is pretty dumb. Catechus especially with how generous of a hitbox it has, because at least with Husk, you need a functioning brain to use it, whereas with Catechus it's just a guaranteed shot unless your aim is really poor. Not to mention the ultimate's doing 100 damage, which downs 3 out of the 4 current survivors, puts Fjord in a higher pedestal than he already should be with how incredibly strong he is. Oh, and Patient Zero is complete buns. An entire skill set only for himself when everybody else has abilities that benefit the whole team, not to mention he's the squishiest survivor out of all of them. Clunky UI. I don't know if it's the resolution of my monitor, but the game's UI is very distracting and blocks a good portion of the game, and without a slider to make the UI smaller or bigger and make it either more transparent or opaque, I just have a good portion of my screen blocked. Poor lighting within a specific map. I know this is an ironic thing to say after praising the game's appearance, but on one particular map in specific, everything will just get dark after a set amount of time, making the whole map just a lot more unbearable. Underwhelming killer designs. Specifically Husk. Catechus' design passes for me as it still resembles Patient Zero with the symbols and color palette chosen, but I cannot say the same for Husk. Taking Noob's design that's a little ragged yet practical, and with a hint of childlike naivete, but then make a killer who's just gray and big hardly tells me this is supposed to resemble or be Noob's counterpart. I can maybe understand that Husk is desaturated to resemble maybe a lack of childish whimsy that Noob has a little bit of, but that's reaching pretty far with assumptions just to make his design a tiny bit more bearable. Point is, Husk is bland and a really boring of a design. He doesn't resemble Noob at all for me. Unclear vault mechanics. The game mentions vaulting as a thing within the game's description, which is pretty neat. However, for where you can actually vault is a little unclear. The game tries telling you that you can vault by making a low obstacle a different shade or color, but that isn't for every vault. Sometimes I can vault over any low ledge, but other times I cannot, and it's between unclear looping structures and abusing an insanely strong window back to back because there's no cost. Point is, I want more concise gameplay mechanics that doesn't leave me asking players what I can and cannot do. Like giving a little prompt telling you where you can vault something would be really nice. Infested with bugs. It's not uncommon to encounter a bug every other game, whether it be generators refusing to add progress after completing a puzzle, or a bug that allows you to instant revive players. So in terms of that regard, the game is not so bug-free either. Zero safeguards for tunneling and camping. Look, I'm not new to these strategies, I have a bunch of hours within Dead by Daylight, but Alter Ego has zero safeguards for extreme tunneling and it sucks. Yeah, you can argue that the team should work together to help against the killer focusing one guy out, but this is Roblox we're talking about. Majority of the players are casuals and wouldn't understand a thing when it comes to team play and coordination, especially if majority of the players play solo or with a couple of friends. So as much as I would love for players to know when to help each other out, so you don't have to add these safeguards in, it just isn't plausible or a reason to justify poor gameplay design. And with camping, there's no incentive to keep players from doing it. There isn't even a slower bleed out when the killer is camping. The only way players can reset someone's bleed out timer is by carrying them, but the game doesn't tell you that anywhere. Not to mention, reviving takes ages, which is a little silly in a game where you're racing against a very, very strict timer. Speaking of, the timer is way too short. This is an issue Kraft mentioned, which is the game's extremely short timer, treating matches as if waiting out the timer was your objective. I'm glad they tried addressing this by making it so when you complete objectives, you're given 10 seconds on the clock, but it isn't enough. Again, like 5 minutes for survivors to finish 5 generators is complete whack. Are we trying to do Violence District or Forsaken? Pick one. Now, this list is getting pretty long, so I'm just gonna get rid of it and start with the new one so that I'm not cluttering the screen too much. Yeah, makes sense? Okay, good. Repetitive gameplay. There is a level of variety in gameplay with characters and playstyles, but it isn't enough to keep me playing for more than an hour or so. Matches start to feel the same after a bit, and the lack of depth or progression really hurts any sense of retention for the game. Sure, I can play Commander one game and be a Gen Rusher support hybrid, which is fun, for 2 games before needing to switch over to someone else or feeling like things are getting too stale. However, the game is an early alpha, so I'll give it some slack as it's not a finished game, but that doesn't mean overall development should be slow and prioritizing skins over gameplay. Lack of progression and depth within character skill sets. Just to reiterate a previous point made, again, I'll give the game some grace as it's newer and still in alpha, but don't slack on releasing new stuff. Scratch marks hardly matter. Although the design for the scratch marks are really cool to me, whenever I play Killer I hardly notice them, neither do they really give a discernible trail when they pop up. And they're pretty brief too. Map hazards. It is a little funny to watch a killer or survivor randomly die because they fell into the pit, but after a while, they just become annoying workarounds that can ruin games sometimes. And that's all the issues I can think of listed. And of course, I'm going to give some feedback on how things can be improved, so I'm not just ripping into the game without giving it some fair feedback. But yeah, here's everything that I've listed, just so we can have a general overview of what has been said. In case you need more time, just make sure to pause and read everything at your own pace. Otherwise, let's get into these potential fixes. In regards to balancing, I believe Patient Zero should be buffed in regards to his invisibility, as his pale color palette makes him really obvious despite becoming incredibly translucent. Because again, when he pops his invisibility, he's not invisible, he's just really transparent. So a fix I'd propose would be to shorten his duration of invisibility to, let's say, about 5 seconds, but during those 5 seconds he's completely invisible, so there's no more watching his faint outline and countering his only getaway tool. But to offer some counterplay and dynamic within the ability, let's also allow scratch marks to form while invisible, so Patient Zero cannot just run in a straight line and get away for free. That way, if Patient Zero wants to get away, he either would have to walk or run in short bursts, which could give him away or trick the killer into thinking he's going a direction he's not. See what I'm laying down here? Obviously, it doesn't have to be this exactly, but just something along the lines would help him immensely. If you don't want to buff his invisibility, then give his invisibility an effect for his team so he can at least help his teammates if desired. It can be something simple as, when popping your ability, nearby teammates are given a brief period of no scratch marks and silent footsteps, or I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing things and seeing what sticks. I'm not a gameplay designer for a living, but just consider these suggestions and make tweaks wherever you want. Try giving Catechus some type of end lag for his dash. It's pretty dumb having a free hit every 20 seconds, so give him some type of end lag, and as compensation you can reduce his cooldown. Again, I'm no expert, but these are just ideas at least. I would buff Commander's passive radius to double, as it is pretty small. I'd buff Fjord's damage reduction duration, as the window is so tiny the killer could wait it out, as what typically happens when they're just catching up. And even when they're actively attacking you, the window is so short the overall damage reduced isn't too substantial. And you could increase its cooldown as like some type of method of keeping the ability under control. Because right now I think Fjord's damage reduction ability is a little weak, outside of very specific situations. I think Noob is in a good spot as is, same way with Husk outside of his ultimate, but a little tweaks can help with that. For the UI, adding a slider to make it a little less opaque would be nice. That, or either making it significantly smaller, as you definitely don't need this large amount of border to tell you the state of your teammates and the killer. Crossroads has a little feature where after a certain point in the match, the entire lighting of the map will change from daylight to darkness, engulfing the whole map in darkness, making everything incredibly hard to see, which can be cool, but it's just way too much. Light in the darkness because it's just way too annoying to try navigating through it and getting caught on random things during chases. Again, I'm no professional character designer, but Husk's entire look is pretty bland. Having a simplistic design for your character isn't always a bad thing when done right. But with Husk, literally nothing about him tells me it's noob, neither does it have any signature characteristics of noob, not even the Roblox icon on his chest. Again, I understand it's not supposed to be an exact copy of noob, but bigger. But at the same time, there's nothing about Husk that tells me it's his counterpart. Maybe try taking the bandages Noob has, use that as like bandages around his fists that are bloodied or like I don't know, bruised or pruned, just something to imply strength. But again, I'm just spitballing here. But at the very least, maybe have the Roblox logo on Husk's chest but make it fainter. Since we really want to emphasize Noob being tougher than he is through having excess bandages wrapped around him in a similar way an experienced brawler or fighter would, why not add that emphasis to Husk's design as well? Why not exaggerate his strength through chains or anything along those lines outside of just giving him muscles? If you wanted to ask my opinion of a brute character being done right in design, let's look at Last Year the Nightmare, for example. Obviously, this isn't a Roblox game, and so the visual and the aesthetic of the entire game is drastically different, but just for the sake of this example of a brute character design being done right, let's just take Last Year the Nightmare's example of their brute, the giant. Here he is, he's big and mighty, but there's characteristics about him you can concur from just his look. And his design is extremely simple too. And then compare this to Husk, where he's supposed to be a reflection of a survivor. There's just nothing there to tell me that that's supposed to be a survivor's killer. As for the unclear vault mechanics, I'll just reiterate a previous point. Just give us a visual prompt whenever we have the option to vault. Same way Violence District does it, same way Murderthon does it. I don't know what the internal processes are for the development of Alter Ego, so I can't comment on what to do with the game's bugginess, so I'll just leave it there for now. As for safeguards with tunneling and camping, we can just have a slower bleed out in the killer's camping and giving a speed boost when revived, so it'll help mitigate excessive tunneling and camping. And to make sure survivors don't abuse the slower bleed out, we can add a system to where if survivors are close to the downed person, their bleed out will return to normal speed. As for a really short in-game timer, there are a couple approaches to how you could solve this, but my approach would be either increasing the overall amount or giving survivors more time per gen completed. Honestly, I think increasing the timer to 7 minutes and making generators take a little longer wouldn't be too bad. And lastly, if the timer expires, it shouldn't be a killer win. In my opinion, it should be a draw. That way, it would incentivize both factions having to race against the clock to achieve their goal, and discourage any potential stalling both sides could do. Repetitive gameplay can easily be solved by adding new content or some type of progression system to keep player retention, and this obviously can be added later down the line, like more differing puzzles for gens or having more team dynamic characters. It's all available for the devs to pick. To fix the issue of scratch marks not having much of an impact throughout the game, just make them appear more often, make them appear closer together, and have them appear for longer. All you gotta do. Because scratch marks as of right now are basically a non-factor in games. As for map hazards, just the more concealed hazards like falling off the boat in one specific ramp in Asylum Island should be removed, but the giant pits in the other map I think is fine. You shouldn't really be falling in there anyway. And that's all, friends. That's everything I wanted to say about my issues and problems with the game Alter Ego. There are a couple things I could mention, like the notoriously bad 2-gen problem that I think is a huge oversight, but Kraft mentioned it in his video pretty briefly, so I don't think I need to mention that. And just a couple other things I don't think I'm experienced enough to give an opinion in. If you made it this far, you have my gratitude, and if any of the devs happen to come across this video, just know I hold your game with the best interest at heart, as I really want to see it be given the best shot possible within the competitive sphere of Roblox asymmetricals. As at the end of the day, I do like the game, just a lot of aspects about it prevent it from being something really great and something I could see myself sticking with. So take this feedback as constructive criticism, as this is what I aimed the video to be, feedback for the devs to improve the game as it is still within its early development stages. I'm holding high hopes the devs will pull through and turn it into something great, especially considering the paywall for entry. So with that, I will depart for now. I hope you take care and have a wonderful rest of your day, my beautiful viewer.